Okay, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome, everyone. It's 9 o'clock here on the East Coast. So let's begin the meeting. People are still dropping in. There's no waiting room, so people will join as we proceed. I'll start with a few words of introduction to today's session. And then we can move on to the talk today. I am Lena Palaniappan, as many of you know. I think some of you are coming back after the last two sessions. Some of you may be new. I am Lena Palaniappan. I work in London, Ontario. I'm a psychiatrist and I convene the Discourse and Psychosis group. This is the third talk in the seminar series of 5 talks. We had a talk on the concept of disorganization in schizophrenia as the first talk. And then we had a detailed discussion on computational approaches, growing approaches in computational linguistics last month. And the third talk today is going to be on data banking. And this is a very crucial and important topic for some of the goals that the Discourse group has. So let me show you that we have around 110 members now. So every time you see this is growing. We have 110 registered members in Discourse. And as you know, Discourse is a diverse international consortium for thought, language, and communication studies in psychosis. And this seminar series is brought to you by a group of steering committee members led by myself. And we have Emery Bora, Eric Tan, Gina Kuperberg, Iris Sommer, who will be the discussant today, and I will introduce her in a few minutes. And then we have Maria Francesca Alonso, who works with me here in London, Ontario, and also a faculty member at Valparaiso University in Chile. And we have Natalia Mota from Brazil and Wolfram Hinzen from Spain. So the meeting, the seminar series was primarily organized by myself, Natalia Mota, and with the help of Eric Tan. So like I said, this is the third talk, and we have Professor Brian McWhinney, who I will introduce in a few minutes, from Carnegie Mellon. And we have Professor Iris Sommer as discussant. We have 2 more talks coming before the end of this year. Next one will be on November 19th. And this is given by Professor Thilo Kircher from Marburg. And I'll be the discussant. This will be on November 19th, which is 3rd week of November. And then we have another talk on 3rd week of December, just a week before Christmas. And that will be on cognition and psycholinguistics. Delivered by Professor Gina Kuperberg and Professor Deb Titone. Now, today's seminar structure follows the same structure that we had last 2 occasions. We'll have around 45 to 50 minutes of talk, and then we'll have 15 minutes led by the discussant, raising issues at hand that comes from the talk, as well as some of the issues that was previously raised within the group through emails and through the Slack community. And then we'll have an open discussion. Now, Professor McManey is happy to take questions during his talk as well, as he mentioned. So you can put your questions on the chat box. I will be monitoring those questions and assign to Professor McManey if we can interrupt and ask that question. If it is relevant to the online topic of discussion, I will do that. If not, we will get those questions answered at the end of the talk. Please remember this event is being recorded as usual, and this will go on YouTube, shared for everyone to see. So if you don't want your videos to be displayed, please switch them off. Also, throughout the talk, it'll be good if you can switch off your microphone and video as well, just for bandwidth reasons. It'll be helpful. So I have a pleasure introducing Professor Brian McWhinney. Many of you know him already. He's a Teresa Haynes Professor of Cognitive Psychology in Computational Linguistics and Modern Languages in Carnegie Mellon. He's very well known in the world of linguistics. His unified competition model analyzes first and second language learning as aspects of a single basic system. He has developed a series of nearly 13 TalkBank open access online databases. And his talk today will be focused on some of his experience on these data banks and how it can guide our own efforts as well. And these talk banks, these databases are used for the study of language learning, for multilingualism, as well as in language disorders. The databases for language disorders right now includes Aphasia Bank, Autistic Spectrum Disorder Bank, ASD Bank, Dementia Bank, Fluency Bank, Right Hemisphere Damage Bank, RHD Bank, TBI Bank, which is Traumatic Brain Injury Bank. So many disorders already have established data banks through TalkBank system, and Professor McManey leads them. His other research topics include methods for online learning of second language vocabulary and grammar, neural network modeling of lexical development, fMRI studies of children with focal brain lesions, and ERP studies of between language competition, and the role of embodied perspectival imagery in sentence processing. So Professor McManey's work is right at the interface of linguistics and cognition, and his efforts have been really groundbreaking for us to, as an example for us to follow for Psychosis Speech Bank. So we have a discussion after his talk, and this will be led by Professor Iris Sommer. Now, people working in psychosis need no introduction to Iris. I have a few background details on her, so I will read them out. She did her public health training and medicine in Amsterdam and did a PhD on language and psychosis with René Kahn and Nick Ramsey at Utrecht. She worked as a psychiatrist in the UMC Utrecht, where she started the very first Voices Clinic and did a large body of work understanding auditory hallucinations in both clinical and non-clinical populations. She demonstrated the cerebral underpinning of auditory verbal hallucinations. She also writes popular scientific books on hallucinations, brain disorders, perception, and gender differences. Two of these are national bestsellers in Netherlands. I have one of them here. This is her most recent release. This is on the female brain. I don't know any Dutch. I managed to get it translated through Google. So this is an interesting book for the public to read. Since 2017, she has been the director of the Research Institute of Brain and Cognition at the University Medical Center at Groningen. She leads several trials right now, randomized controlled trials, aimed at improving prognosis for patients with schizophrenia spectrum disorders, including the large Hamlet-Ophelia cohort to investigate the long-term aspects of antipsychotic medications. Interestingly, for most of these trials, she's collecting speech data as well, which I'm sure Iris will tell you more about. She's had several laurels, including being an invited member of the Young Dutch Academy of Science, Dutch Brain Foundation Anniversary Prize for her work on the gut-brain axis. And in 2021, she was invited to be the member of the Holland Academy of Science. So this is Iris. And we also have contribution for today's discussion from Britta Elvewag. Unfortunately, Britta is not available to be online today with us, but she has contributed a lot to the discussion that Iris will lead. So Britta, as you know, is a neuroscientist. Many of you know her work. She's a professor at the University of Tromsø, the Arctic University of Norway, and the Norwegian Center for e-Health, Digital Health Research at Tromsø. She was previously the head of neuropsychology unit in the Clinical Brain Disorders Division at the NIMH. Her work focuses on neuropsychological and neuropsychiatric components of schizophrenia and the use of computational models of language as an assay for brain function and dysfunction. So Britta is not here, but her thoughts are with us today for leading the discussion. So that's from me. Again, reminding everyone that this is being recorded. Please use your chat box. Now over to you, Brian.
Unmute myself. Hello, everybody. Let me share. Sharing already, Lena?
You should be able to share now, Brian. Do you see the share screen button at the bottom?
I'm looking for it. Share screen, desktop, share. Am I sharing there?
Yeah, it's working. We can see your desktop.
Thank you, thank you. Well, such an honor to be invited to speak with so many eminent people in this area, about which, of course, I've always been fascinated and probably know much less than I should. Well, just I hope that we'll be able to make some use of the facilities that we've developed in TalkBank for this idea of getting language in psychosis. It would be really a great thing. So let me outline here some of the ideas I have, And as Lena said, if there are questions, maybe you put them in the chat and he can interrupt me and I can answer them as we go. Yeah. So what I want to review today in the 45, 50 minutes, I guess, is take just a quick peek at an example of the kind of data we have on the web, look at some of the structure and the principles underlying our work in TalkBank, which is, you know, as Lena said, the actually now 14 different TalkBank data banks. Some go over the ground rules for data sharing, which I think is very, very important in this case, since there are many, many issues about data sharing. Look at some of the use cases for applying TalkBank to Psychosis, then get more down into the details of TalkBank, look at some of the corpora, the manuals, the tutorials, the system we have been developing called Collaborative Commentary, and also our database system, TalkBank DB, for really analyzing data statistically. We might get on to the last couple issues about clan commands, or we may run out of time for those. Okay, so let me begin by just mentioning the core principles. TalkBank is really focusing on spoken language, not written language. Of course, you know that there's an enormous amount of data on everything from Google and from the web on written language. And you even have, you know, blogs from people. There are projects that want to look at people who are contemplating suicide, and it's all in blogs, and it's not really spoken language. But spoken language is rather more difficult to, you have to transcribe it, it has much more richness. So, but that is basically what TalkBank is about, not just written, but really spoken language. And we're committed to open access. Now, there may be passwords and maybe certain groups that are limited, but open in the sense that once you get access to the data, you have complete access. And the, well, I have here that we have over 8,000 published articles. That's a little out of date, probably more like 9,000 now. We've been recently receiving a lot of support from NIH in order to implement some really important standards that are being pushed by the the community of open science and open data. One of the groups is the Core Trust Seal, which comes from Amsterdam, and that is we have Core Trust Seal approval. We also working with the Office for Data Science Strategy from NIH, and so all of these focus on this notion of FAIR, which is to make the data really available, open, accessible, and trust, which is to make sure that the repository itself is stable and well managed. And so we have data banks in 6 clinical areas, some of which Lena mentioned, some child language areas, some other areas. I'll review those quickly. And then one of the most important things is that all of the data is being transcribed in the same way using a format called chat, which is really a very comprehensive method for transcribing spoken language. And all of the data are in the chat format. In fact, they are validated against a schema, so that allows the programs to operate in a consistent way on this data. And also allows us to have a database, which we call the TalkBank DB, which also can help us for the problem of replicability, that if a person makes an analysis at a certain time and date on a certain data set, that can be replicated. We can go even back 1, 2 more years to the state of the data that it was at the time that analysis was being done. And also from the TalkBank DB, a lot of statistical analyses can be done directly. There's another system called the TalkBank browser, which I'll illustrate, where you actually can look at interactions. And then the system which we're building now called Collaborative Commentary, and I'll really mostly be describing what we plan with that. There's also the principle of interoperability, which allows us to take data in different formats and convert them all to this same chat format. Okay, so one of the biggest issues, I think facing all fields in spoken language, but particularly fields that deal with clinical data, are how to share data. So there's ethics, of course, regarding data collection. And some of those, informed consent, of course, and, people being known that they're being recorded and so on. But anyway, I'll go through these in more detail. But all of these can be found inside what we call our ground rules. So I'm clicking now and going actually to the web, from my computer to the web. Oops, what did I do? There you go. So here's our talkbank.org is the sort of the main website. And under that is a page with TalkBank, the sharing principles. And I'm not going to go through every single one of these, but perhaps one that might be interesting to look at are the options for data sharing. And here you can see that there are really many levels at which data can be shared. You can have the very open data, which we have for a lot of child language data, for example, and a lot of second language data. People are really not concerned about even being anonymized. And then there are some where you have to have an anonymization or pseudonymization, and some where you really have to remove audio mentions of people's names. We haven't really done video blurring, although it is a possibility. And then there are all sorts of levels of password protection for different types of sensitivity of data and so on. Okay, and then there are these IRB issues, which I'll get into a little bit further in a bit. How do you work with your IRB on issues that they will bring up regarding data sharing? Okay, let me go back to my slides here for a moment. So all of these things are inside that ground rules, which is talkbank.org/share. Okay, now, so to go a little bit deeper, dig a little bit deeper into some of these data sharing issues, these are ones that actually Lena and Britta and Iris have raised, and other people, of course, have raised these same issues over the years. So one of them is the degree to which one can actually achieve audio identification. In other words, obviously transcripts could be anonymous, but can audio really be anonymous? And here within this other page, which is talkbank.org/share-IRB, there's a couple sections here. One deals with the issue of GDPR compliance, which we could talk about a little bit. And the other deals with contributing audio. And there's several citations here for articles that review this issue of speaker identification through audio. The basic finding is that actually you can't really do it. I mean, you can do it if you have, say, 10 people and you want to say, which of 10 people is this particular recording from? But as Mark Lieberman, one of my colleagues at Penn, found, even just identifying which of the 9 Supreme Court justices on the US Supreme Court is speaking at a given time is a really difficult problem. If what you're trying to do is identify a single person out of, let's say, a population of 100,000, maybe even 10,000, then it's actually impossible. Now, at some time in the future, this may become possible. I'm sure the Chinese will figure this out. But anyway, right now, this is not a reality. Okay. So GDPR compliance comes off that same link. And yeah, I have done a fair amount of time looking at GDPR issues. And the bottom line, as I read it, is that anonymized scientific data can be shared, even with the United States. But there are possibilities if that doesn't feel comfortable to some IRBs. I think IRBs interpret the GDPR rules the way they really wish to, or the university will. It is possible to set up sites outside of the USA. So that might be something that people are interested in. In order to do that, what we're working on is a thing called containerization, where we take all of TalkBank software and basically put it in a package which then can be deployed at another site. Okay, so another issue, the issues of data transfer agreements and data use agreements, DTAs and DUAs. So I've had actually 3 DTAs and they work out fine. I have one with Australia, one with UCL London. I can't remember the third one, but in that case, what is happening is that a university says that, yes, these data can go into TalkBank. And so that's an agreement between TalkBank and actually a university. And those work out reasonably well. They're not my favorite, but I can do it. Most agreements, I should say, most contributions of data that we've received are simply contributed by the investigators, who sign just a very simple form saying that I have an IRB and it's been approved and here's the data. Then there's another thing called the DUA, which is much more difficult, which is a data use agreement. And those are really between universities and the end user. And that doesn't really work, because with TalkBank, we could have any number of end users, and each one of them would then have to sign a different DUA with the original creator of the data. So DTAs are fine, but DUAs are rather difficult. Okay, regarding ownership of data, one has to remember that ownership of data remains with the home universities, although sometimes NIH says maybe it's our data. That's an interesting dialogue. And those people, of course, can request removal, as can participants. And in fact, no one has ever requested removal. So, I've been doing this, now, for 34 years. And no one, well, there was one lady who raised it as a legal point because she was a lawyer herself. And, she said, no, I didn't really mean it. I didn't really want to have my data removed. I just wanted to see if it was possible. Okay. So, so what are some use cases for Psychosis Bank? So how would this work? And also, if we, is that the name you would want to use? I kind of like Psyche Bank myself. So there is old data, which you could have reconsented. And then there is new data where you have your own properly configured informed consent, where you specifically said that the data would go into TalkBank and it would be anonymized. Then, so those are, important issues, but you can have both old and new data coming in. One of the other, I don't know if it's a use case really as a consideration, is the development of a shared protocol. And Lena and others have already started formulating that. And the protocol looks in very much certain ways like the one we use in Aphasia Bank. The Aphasia Bank protocol, by the way, is also used with some modifications for TBI, Bank, for RHD Bank, and also with more modifications for Dementia Bank. Now, stuttering, which is Fluency Bank, is very different. It has a very different protocol. But all of those are really discourse. We're really looking at discourse in all those different language disorders, basically. Okay, so that is an important consideration. Now, in terms of more of the use case, this new system that we're developing called collaborative commentary, I think would just be fascinating for work in psychosis, where I'll show you where you can actually go into the transcript and working within a given research group or with your students. Again, I don't know how much people are trying to focus on research applications. I assume that's the major one, but also teaching applications. You can go in with a group leader who has group members, and they can issue their own comments regarding certain portions of the discourse, and those will get RB stored in a separate commentary database. Okay, so and in a way, through that kind of work, you can do what conversation analysts call creating collections, which is certain types of events. You might call them, might be, for example, in aphasia, would be paraphasia, circumlocutions, and so on. And you would illustrate them by having tags in your commentary, which would then be picked up by the TalkBank DB, and you could pull all these collections of certain types of verbal events. Another type of thing that we supporting are these student-oriented grand rounds. We've developed for aphasia, for TBI, and for RHD. And these are really demonstrations to students of certain types of behaviors so that they can really understand them in greater depth. Now, all of the, again, this collaborative commentary and some of the other systems allow you to do conversation analysis, really, which is, perhaps an important part of some people's interests. But further on, once you have all this data available, you can run additional analyses that, so in a sense, elaborate or enrich a corpus. So you could run, we have methods for running acoustic analysis through PROT and prosodic. We haven't really pushed on facial analysis, but there are people who do that. If you had video, you could look at facial and orientation and gesture, and then also fluency analyses, which are very important for dementia. I don't know that they're important for psychosis or not. We have developed automatic profiling methods for aphasia, and some of those may be relevant. I've noticed that I think Lena mentioned use of cometrics. We've also done propositional density analyses. All of these are automated analyses. Now, if you have something like a very interesting thought and language index, I would call that a not so automatic profile, but it might be possible to automate some pieces of that. And that would also be very interesting. Okay, so questions about support. Where would we get the money to do all this work? Our own research is heavily supported right now by NIDCD at NIH for aphasia, stuttering, apraxia, PPA. But we also have had support really for 30 years or more for child language work from NICHD, child language. But we also occasionally, back and forth, we keep on getting support from NSF. NSF doesn't have the more continuous level of support that NIH does, but it has been very helpful in specific projects at specific times through both linguistics, psychology, developmental psychology, and to some degree, the education and human resources branch. We haven't yet really tried to get support for our work in dementia, but it's being extremely, our data in dementia is being used by just hundreds and hundreds of mostly computational linguists and computer scientists around the world in order to do this early diagnosis, early detection of the onset of dementia. So we probably will be pushing on that. And it would be great. I think that NIMH would be interested in work on psychosis. It is within their purview. We've also got a lot of support recently from the Office of Data Science Strategy, which is really trying to push the integrity of databases. They have a notion that they're at some point in the future going to bring all these different types of medical data together and biomedical and so on. It's important. We haven't really linked to imaging work yet. We probably will be doing that with a couple new data sets coming in, and that would be really fantastic since I see so much of the work from this group includes imaging. Of course, there is the Open Neuro archive, and it would be fairly easy to have mutual links going back and forth. So TalkBank is a member of the European language group called Clarin, which is given the European Union support and also national support for work in computational linguistics, corpus analysis, and so on. So those are some possibilities. We even got money from the DFG, the Deutsche Forschungsgemeinschaft at one point. So there are some other possibilities. Okay, I just want to mention that protocol just a little bit in case some of you may be already familiar with it, but Lena does have it, I believe, on the web somewhere. That, as I say, is very similar to the Aphasia Bank protocol, and it's nice because having some of those similarities would allow us to use some of the same control subjects and so on. Of course, a lot of this has to be translated in different languages, and most of our data in aphasia is still from English, although it is broadening out now to other languages and also some bilinguals. But we do have tools for many languages. So there's a difference between the fact that we have the data in English, but the actual computational tools are pretty good for about 14 languages. A lot of the Aphasia Bank, skipping to point number 4, has really focused on the story retell of the Cinderella story. It turns out to be a really great method for getting narrative ability, all sorts of language forms, and in a very consistent way. Also, the work in dementia has often used cookie theft. No, we don't use that for aphasia, but and then the cat rescue picture. Some of these are, The pneumatic apperception test is not something we use, but that would be certainly a good part of a protocol. And then the others are the imaginative seeing, the personal narrative, the dream report. I think that would be really interesting. And the idea of, tell me, open conversation, tell me a bit about yourself. So those are not included in any of our current ones, but they do seem very relevant to, psychosis. Okay, so why contribute? Why would anyone want to contribute? Well, on one hand, we are seeing more and more pressure from funding agencies that actually, by the way, you're going to have to contribute. In 2023, NIH is going to make this absolutely obligatory. And it may even get to the point where when you submit a grant proposal, you're going to have to already have an agreement from the database to which you are going to be contributing about how you're going to contribute, in what form, and so on. Okay, apart from that, and also journals, some journals require it. Physicists, of course, require this totally. And of course, microbiology and so on. Part of the other is that you may be a member of a work group that wants to use corpora to elaborate some ideas. And then basically, you want access to corpora, and you would probably want to make use of this new collaborative commentary system. And then we've really found that people that contribute data, this is our experience mostly from child language, that you get a lot more recognition by the fact that you contributed your data. People consider you more important, and they not only cite your work, because we have a method where you have to, if you use a person's data, you must cite one published article, one specific published article that was based on that data, and that increases your Google citations. But also, you may be part of a dialogue that talks about the findings and so on. Another is that once the data is contributed to the database and we run these automatic analyses through PROT or for some other fluency way, and also morphosyntax and some of the profile package analyses, you'll actually have more data that you yourself might not have created. You make your data available to students and colleagues. And one thing I found remarkably, of course, I'm on in age myself, but some of my colleagues are retiring and so on. And when they retire, they say, "Oh, would you please take all my data? I should have given you 20 years ago." And I say, okay, people really like the idea of not having their data die with them. That's a little grim, I guess, isn't it? But, it's great. And we've really gotten a lot of data in that way. Okay, so the website. I just, here you can click on this, you go to the website, there's the same thing you just saw on the other slide. And really everything is here, manuals so CHAT is the coding system, the transcription system, CLAN are the programs. MORE is a system for morphosyntactic analysis that we really need for a lot of these other language disorders in order to do grammatical analysis. Now, I don't know how important that really is for psychosis, although I think some of the cohesion analysis may depend on that. And so it would be great to have that done, but in order to do cohesion analysis, you're probably going to have to do a little bit more. Okay, so there's all the different links to all the different banks here. And the TalkBank DB system, other stuff. Okay, so perhaps one of the most important, if you were a beginning learner, let me go back here, are these links to these tutorial screencasts. So here they're either available locally from our machine or particularly in Asia, where some of the connections are not as good to North America, they have local YouTube copies. So YouTube, is all around the world, so you can avoid, like for example, when the earthquake broke the cable to Taiwan, at least they could still get on their Taiwanese website. Okay, so these are all about how to, just how to learn, how to transcribe, how to analyze, and so on. Okay. So these are links to what I was saying there, and that's sort of repetitive. I'm afraid this is really child language oriented. There's so many great YouTubes about silly things that kids say, anyway, but I don't know that really is true for psychosis. I don't know that people have YouTube, any YouTubes. There are for aphasia, And so that's kind of an interesting question. So we have 5 child language data banks. I won't go through all those, but yeah, one of them actually, though, I might mention, Home Bank, is used a thing called the Lena system, which people just basically put on the kid and records 16 hours a day, not 8 hours when they're sleeping, and it picks up everything in the home. I wonder whether that would be interesting to follow people with psychosis through the entire day. Now, the problem there is that you don't really get transcription. What you have is what we call diarization. You get a sort of a markup of who's talking when and for how long. And eventually you may get some automatic speech recognition, but no guarantees, because the audio environments are often pretty bad. But a lot of people are using that type of data to make certain conclusions about density of interaction, nature of interaction, and so on. I think it could be interesting. Okay, so the disorder banks I mentioned pretty much already. Then we also do a lot with multilingualism, bilingualism, code switching, so on, second language learning. Yeah. And then there are a couple banks. One is a ca.talkbank.org, which might be interesting in terms of really linking up some of the psychosis work with other work in conversation analysis, and then studies of classroom interaction. So in progress are possible, perhaps Psychosis Bank, if we can get some funding. Well, actually, to be honest, we could just go ahead and do it. I don't think we really need funding as I mentioned to Lena, but to do it really well, it would be better to have more funding. But yeah, if people already have data, we can do it. We can just set it up. There's also some people interested in a voice bank, voice abnormalities. Frankly, I'm not that interested in that myself, but speech people are. And gesture bank, which would be fantastic, and it's so difficult to do. Okay. So I just want to show some examples of various things. Yeah, actually, I was going to show an example early on and I didn't do it. Oh, well, I maybe should. Well, let me first do what I call an interoperability example. So if you go to, here's a file on my desktop here called Cinco. This is about some girls in Los Angeles playing hopscotch, and it's in Spanish. And here they are. Here's a chat file, and everything is linked to audio. Oops, let me move the video so you can see it maybe. Okay, so it's a really beautifully analyzed interaction from Chuck Goodwin. And my point here is simply to show that we show interoperability by running a program here called chat, which is our format, to Elan. And then I have to declare that it's an MP4, MP4 cinco.chat. And I run it, and it ran, and then I open it in Elan, and here's Elan, and okay, so that's the idea, is that you can go back and forth between different formats. Elan is very good for gesture. Now, again, are people going to be getting video? They may not be able to share the video, but it is possible we could archive the video and make it available in certain ways. Okay, so browsable database. Yeah, so this is what I really should have shown a little earlier. Let's say if you go to Aphasia Bank and yeah, Aphasia Bank. Now here we say browsable database. And this, we go say to English, aphasia, Adler, 06A. Now, at this point, you do need a password. And sometimes I have to put it in several times because we need one password for the transcript and one for the video. Okay, yeah, they always tell me that. Now, you can go to the original transcript here from here, and you can see that if you wish. But you can also, oh, I lost it, sorry. That was dumb. Let me try again. Okay, but you can play from here.
How do you think your speech is these days?
Is a little bit bigger.
A little bit bigger. Okay, so, and then I can stop it there. And one thing I can also do at this point is move my, I have to move all that. Okay, I can log in to do collaborative commentary. Okay, collaborative annotation, and to say, okay, I'm going to make a comment about this. And he means better from bigger. I wasn't very well worded, but I submit my commentary and it's there and I could see it later. And so that's the idea of the commentary that will, eventually be organized by groups. And only you would have, well, I'll say a little bit more about commentary in a bit. So that's the idea of a browsable database. I can decide to go further down here and play later.
Got this. Is Ford Woundwood for Lesward? Is it individual, not eligible?
Okay, well, we're not getting exactly, but and you can do searching and so on. Now this is really just the browser, and you can see all banks here. You can see dementia anywhere you want to go in TalkBank. Okay, right. So another way to interact with the data is to pull down the data. So if I went to aphasia again, I went to group sessions, Trove, I could show you that. So let's say I go to Aphasia Bank. I'm using Aphasia Bank as sort of a, closest cousin to Psychosis Bank, obviously not the same thing at all, but you get the sense, at least they're adults, at least not child language or bilinguals. And, these are different group data sessions. And of course, a lot of it is interviewer participant or, clinician participant, but these are more group data sessions. And here you could do the browsable database. We already did that, but you can download transcripts to your desktop. And then at that point, if I don't know if I can get to my desktop anymore, but somewhere over here on the desktop, I downloaded all the files. Come on. Oh, there are too many icons here. Here it is, trove.zip, and I could open it up and I could see that there are files here. And those are the files. I could then, maybe play one of these and so on. Or I could go back here again to where I was in the group sessions Trove and go to the media folder. So that's separate download. Now, in order to get media, a large amount of media, one of the best things is to use Google Chrome's thing called download, which is this little green icon. I won't do it right now, but you could download everything in the whole folder by using download. I'll take a peek at this here. Okay. Here's a group session.
Now we're rolling. Now we're going to share the story. This is a story trove. This was found in an attic in an old building. So that's all we know. Utah, help us figure out what this story is about.
You pick it up.
It's in from an attic in a house.
And you picked it up.
Yeah. Now, I have to say, in full disclosure, it's actually a fictional story.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Right. Okay. Anyway, yeah. So those were done with multiple cameras. You can, if you want, you can have 3 different cameras, and you can go back and forth from one view to the other. But anyway, that's most data. We don't need that. Okay. Oh, a few more minutes, and then I better stop, I guess. So the TalkBank DB. Well, I think that might be the last thing I can show you. I'll have to skip some of the other, but TalkBank DB is the database. And if I go to TalkBank DB, I might want to look at, again, let's say aphasia. And here go to aphasia and English. And well, within that, there could be controls, but I want all the aphasics, and then I'll search TalkBank DB, and suddenly I get all of them, and I can take any one of these guys and click on it and go back to the transcript there. But I don't want to do that right now. I might want to do look at different participants, different utterances, different tokens, different token types. One interesting thing are n-grams, which are, you know, a series of 2 or 3 or 4 words. Let's say we do an n-gram sequence of 3, and we do a search for that, and we do some computing, and then you get all these different things, and you'll find some of it has to do with the fact that they're describing the Cinderella thing, and it's frequent that they say to the ball, but they also say a lot of things like I don't know what, and I can't say. There's a lot of I don't know. So they're you know, now if it were looking at more free natural conversation, you might have a better idea of what kinds of things people are saying. Okay, then the other thing is to look for what we call corpus query language. Here you can say, let's look for an adjective. We'll put in an adjective, and then we'll follow that maybe by the word stroke. This is, again, we got aphasics, remember? So some kind of stroke, and we search, and here's all the different types of strokes. My first stroke, the first stroke, a lot of first stroke actually, yeah. That's interesting, major stroke, major stroke. So we could do, we have not yet implemented keyword in context, and we really should, which would be perfect for this, okay. So that's the basic idea, and all of the TalkBank, so you can save anything you have in TalkBank DB. Here it comes, it's an Excel file, and click on it, and they always threaten you with something, but you say yes anyway, and here you go, and you could take it into R or into Python or anything you want, and actually we have an API from R and Python to get it directly without even doing this, okay. So that's TalkBank DB. Last possible thing is to just, oh yeah, well, so metaphor analysis, and the way TalkBank DB is relevant, I was engaged for 2 years with a big IARPA metaphor project, and a lot of what was mentioned earlier in our discussion about computational linguistics and Psychosis Bank ended up looking a lot like what we call word sketch. From Sketch Engine, which is, you know, something that we could easily implement too. So these are 2 things that through TalkBank DB we would implement word sketch and keyword in context, and looking at collocations and so on. And it turns out that metaphors really are studied best by corpora rather than through the AI methods that some of my colleagues tried to use. Okay, I'm not going to talk about clan commands. Just to mention that we are working on automatic speech recognition. We have been using, you know, some services, but we really want to do it through our own in-house methods of working with a fellow at in computer science, language technologies at CMU, Shinji Watanabe, who's created a system called ESPNet. And, you know, that's really more for the future. So I'm not going to talk about our more grammar because I ran out of time, but we can do automatic recognition of a transcript just like that through all of its morphosyntax and everything. That's all totally programmed. Okay, I think I better stop. Oh, wait. No, it can't stop without the obligatory thank you slide.
Thank you very much, Brian. It was fantastic. A very good overview of the database and some practical, you know, demonstrations.
I'll stop share. I'd have to stop share, right?
Yeah, if you can stop share, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
This is here, so it is over to you to lead the discussion.
Thank you so much, Brian. I much enjoyed your presentation and your energetic talk about this. This is really like a dream database that we really want to have for Psychosis for sure. And it's fantastic to see that you actually see much more possibilities than barriers, because often people think in barriers, and there are many, of course, but you just showed us that they can all be overcome, and that this is there for aphasia, it's there for child speech. So why not have something like this for for psychosis. It's a researcher's dream, of course, what she just showed us. So let me just check a few things if I understood them right with you. So is it true that there are often videos from participants and from their supervisors in the database?
Yeah, well, so for Aphasia Bank, we have what we call the protocol data, and all protocol data are video and open to people who have the password, basically.
Yeah.
And they were informed consent, and no IRB gave us any problem because as long as it's informed consent. Now, I should say that the collection of the data was both at universities and at life treatment centers, like the Adler Center in New Jersey, where people come and they have their own internal IRB, or some of them have an IRB. The reason I mention this is that the most difficult would be university hospitals.
Yeah, I'm in one.
I know a lot of you are in university hospitals. So I don't want you to think it's that easy, because but we also have data from university hospitals.
Yeah.
I mean, and we have, and sometimes clinics are outside of the university hospitals. We are trying to avoid any introduction of HIPAA data. And so we aren't at this point asking for, medical diagnosis. We're asking for speech and language therapist, or SLP data, which is not HIPAA covered.
I understand, yes. And I also I think I saw in the Excel sheet, or maybe that's what already on the website, that there's a split between talk from the participants and talk from the supervisors. So you know who is seeing what, right?
Oh, yeah. And well, of course, in the transcript, it goes like that, right? But in the TalkBank database, you can say which participant you want. I mean, it has complete access to all the details of the transcript, because the transcripts are, they're in a chat format, but that is actually translated into, well, it used to be XML, and now it's into JavaScript and JSON. So there's a complete abstract definition, and then the TalkBank database uses that abstract definition to get really anything you want.
Indeed. And you do the transcription of the original data within TalkBank, or will the people who provide it also provide the transcripts to you?
It's been, well, so in trial language, it's almost always been the people who did the work. And in Aphasia Bank, we did most of the work.
Right.
And that we got funded to do that. Occasionally we got some transcripts from people, but typically we got the recordings and we did the transcription.
Yeah, I see. And do you use the exact original files, or has there been maybe some scaling to keep the volume on a similar level for all files, or is it just
volume,
as people?
Volume is a problem, and you can get a similar volume through. We use Amadeus Pro on the Mac, and it does beautiful volume adjustment. But no, to be quite honest, we have not done volume adjustment, and that became a big issue when we started to work in dementia with all these computer scientists who really wanted perfect audio to be the same across every file and everything. And so they did a lot of curation of the audio to kind of bring it. And it turned out when they ran their algorithms, the curation didn't make any difference.
That's good to know.
It was basically, and these, the audio for the Dementia Bank, these were done on cassettes back in the 80s, okay? I mean, they were just, but audio is a big thing. And, the better the audio, really, I think it's a huge thing.
And do you use maybe noise reduction for these older tapes, or is that the same thing, just use as is?
Yeah, well, yeah, for the older data, we haven't tried. We did a little noise cleanup. That's another thing that but really, at this point, we should be getting good audio data.
Good.
I think that's there's no excuse. I actually saw that Lena mentioned the ASHA standards, and they were really extreme. I don't think you need to go quite that far, but yeah. Anyway, that's its own topic. Yeah.
On one of your later slides, you mentioned the automatic speech recognition, and that you're working with the ESP system that sounded really very interesting. Would you have a moment to explain a bit more about where you're at now and if you have that working maybe for other languages than English as well?
Well, no, we haven't. You know, ESP.NET is built on top of Caldi, which is the Johns Hopkins University, you know, set of tools, recipes. We had an earlier system. All this is from the speech technology people at Carnegie Mellon. Well, actually, Shinji Watanabe was a member of the Johns Hopkins, and he came over to Carnegie Mellon last year. And his system is an end-to-end system. So, you know, some of the older systems where they do the language, and then they do the audio, and then they do acoustics. So they do, you know, it's very complicated. And this is just going all the way through to recognize. And I mean, you know, speech technology is very complicated. Everything now is using, of course, these deep learning methods. And, you know, they use, you know, bidirectional and attention and all these additional features to, you know, do the best they can, and they're getting better and better all the time. Now, the thing is, of course, training. And so, you know, there are some attempts to do what we call, you know, universal language independent recognition of acoustics. And that is making some headway, surprisingly, but right now we're assuming English, really. And the training sets are for English, but you know, this is, you can get a new training set for Dutch, let's say, you know.
Yeah.
And that would not be, I mean, there, you know, you put that inside the rest of the mechanics of ESP.NET, you know.
Yes.
Your training corpus.
Thanks a lot. I also very much like the rules that you have for authorship. Often there is a kind of author group, and if you use the data, for example, like in the Enigma consortium, all the authors will contribute, but you have it differently. So you have to cite at least one of the previous work when you're using TalkBank data.
Well, actually, yeah, if you go to all these little web pages, like I'm not sharing anymore, but if you go to any given corpus page, and I think, I'm guessing that most of the data that we're talking about here for Psychosis will be individual contributors, and they will have their name on that corpus of that thing, and they will have published an article. Now, some of it may be a dissertation in progress, you know, but there'll be some publication. And then we say, you must cite this one. And then you
cite the original work. That makes a lot of sense, actually. It's nicer than to have these huge author groups in which you publish always with like 150 authors. So I think this is a very nice alternative. Maybe one final question, because I see that there are also many other questions in the chat. When I ask patients to use their recordings, we only have speech recordings, we don't have video. They're often anxious not to appear on the internet, so they don't want their data to be freely available on the internet. And I was thinking, sorry, with the user code, a researcher could, of course, download data and maybe put them on a medium like YouTube. You probably have rules to prevent that from happening.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, that's in the ground rules, and if they did that, that would be a violation.
Exactly.
I've never seen that happen.
No, I don't think researchers will do it, but it's just the risk, and I think it's good to have clear rules about that. Also
I mean, if it's not video data, I'm really surprised that you're getting such pushback, because we really don't get that. And then obviously all the people in aphasia have all agreed to have their video on the web for researchers, you know.
That's good, yes. Well, of course, we do have paranoid patients. That does make a difference.
Yeah. I wonder if it's a cultural difference.
That could be, yes, that could also be.
I mean, you know, that could be. I don't want to get it. I don't want to start polemicizing about cultural differences at this point. You know,
that's okay.
I know they exist. Let me put it that way.
For sure.
Okay.
Yeah. So I see that we already have 5 questions in the chat. Lena, would you like me to read them, or shall we invite the people who ask them to ask Brian directly?
Sure, Iris. When you and Brian were discussing, I was reaching out to everyone individually to see if they want to come online or not, and everyone wants to come online. So why
Oh,
don't
they
you
want,
start
and we
with-
can see their video.
Yes. Well, the first one may not have video. Albin Voppel. You can introduce Albin, Iris, and call him on.
Yes, Alban is a very talented PhD student who just had his PhD dissertation accepted. He's not a doctor yet, but chances are now very high that he will be. And yeah, he has a lot of hands-on and theoretical experience in voice processing for psychotic disorders.
Thank you for the introduction. Yeah, my question is for Brian McWhinney. Like, how do you deal with indirect privacy sensitive information in your databases? So someone says, I grew up as the third son of the baker in a town or something like that.
Oh, yeah. The location reference, you really have to remove that. So we can do audio bleeping of that segment. Yeah, the two things that you need to remove are, of course, last names and it's, I think it's a good idea for the interviewer to not say, and may I ask your name, on the recording, it just makes things more difficult to get that kind of, demographic data, or don't turn on the tape recorder when you do that. But then the other is the location. Now that is really important for small countries, but people know each other like you could imagine Iceland, right? That's everybody knows everybody, right? Actually, we do have some Icelandic data, but yeah, but in a bigger country, it's less of a problem, bigger cities. But yeah, if there's actually street names and things like that, maybe even the name of the hospital would be something. So what we do is in the transcript, we don't write the name, we say address or last name. We didn't ever have any people referring to the hospital, but they might in this case. And then whenever we see that word last name or address, we then go to that place in the audio and actually silence it out. Is that
quite clear? Yeah.
That's basically what we do. We had to do a lot of that with Danish.
So we have one more question. Well, we have a few more questions, but the next one is from Rohit Lodi. He's a consultant psychiatrist who works here in London, Ontario. Rohit, over to you.
Hi, thank you for this talk. This is really exciting. My previous experience with the genetic banking data was that the ethics committees usually ask for it to be destroyed sometimes within 10 years, 5 years. So creation of a bank, I was just wondering what sort of policies do you have in terms of destroying or expiration of the data? Does that vary or is it?
That is a very outmoded concept. And, really anything that, so look, the reality is that once things are on the web, the idea of destruction is actually out of, as they say, the ship is out of the harbor. I have heard less and less about this data destruction over the years. So I'm very surprised. Is this Western Ontario?
So it was Saskatchewan last, actually.
Saskatchewan, yeah. Interesting. Yeah, I do have some of that home bank data from Saskatchewan, and I noticed they were rather protective. You must have a rather difficult IRB. I'm a real connoisseur of IRBs. Let me, don't deal with the UNC, University of North Carolina. They're the worst. But no, honestly, that's not always true. We have some data from North Carolina, but they are difficult. Yeah. That really has changed over the years, and I think that's something you could go back to your IRB and say that's not a really. I don't know that there's anything in the NIH guidelines or the city training or any of those things that talk about data destruction. I think this is something that is sort of almost folklore.
But just to,
I'd like to. Maybe I'm wrong. But this is very rare that I'm hearing this anymore.
Just add one point to that discussion, Brian. Some IRBs, like our local ones, they do differentiate the pen and paper records, how long you keep them, when do you destroy them?
Oh, okay.
From other kind of digital records. I think you're right. Some legalese in the IRB statements could still be very old-fashioned and not really considering.
Right. In the old IRB, the investigator actually says, "I will destroy this in 3 years," and that makes their IRB very happy. Yeah, but now that's being said less and less, because what does it mean to destroy digital data? Yeah. I mean, I have actually a photo of myself taking a hammer and smashing some cassettes that Catherine Snow sent to me. Okay, to prove that we really did data destruction. Of course, we had digital copies, so that was a joke, really. Yeah.
Okay, well, we have Sunny Tang next. Sunny,
thank you, and thanks for the talk, and thank you for leading this effort. I can't wait for I can't wait to see it come to fruition. I was wondering, did I hear you or understand you correctly that PHI would not be included in Psychosis Bank? I know that the protocol that Lena has shared includes information about specific, clinical data. So I was wondering what the plan was for how we will share that. And certainly the diagnosis is implied in the bank.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is a real problem. So PHI is HIPAA, basically, right? I mean, it's collected in a medical environment or collected in a clinical environment.
I think for many of us, it will be clinical.
If it's clinical outside of the hospital by SLPs, then there's no problem. So if there are tests and things like that. But if it's blood work or something like that, then that would be, yeah, I mean, this is something we really will have to talk about, because it really sets up a higher level of IRB review. And to do whether that data could be dissociated. There's also the issue of if you anonymize, how are you ever going to retrieve data that somebody says they want to have removed? So you have to have what you call an honest broker who knows the codes that relate the anonymized subject, code to the actual person, and that has to be a person that is not involved in the project, and that can be done. But that could be a problem. So what kind of data do you have in mind that would be crucial, for example?
Well, I think, so we have clinical scales. So we go beyond the diagnosis and measure specifically, for example, like hallucinations, delusions, their functioning, negative symptoms, which are essential to characterizing the dimensional experience of people with psychosis.
Yeah, I mean, to me, this is clinical data, but I mean, this is something that a speech therapist would have. But if you're a doctor and do it, so are you a doctor?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
Are you a doctor?
Yes, I am.
You're a medical doctor. So
IRB
that's the problem. If your title is medical doctor, then have somebody in your lab do it, or somebody. There's a border there of some sort.
Yeah.
No, but
unfortunately, I don't think it makes a difference who does it for our IRB, since we're at a hospital. They consider all such data to be PHI. But so I guess that's something we should figure out and maybe discuss further.
There may be ways of doing this, but I knew it was complicated enough and not necessary for aphasia. And we can also even have imaging data, because that would be D-Link too. And and that goes over an open neural. I may be making more of a problem here than there is. All I know is that it was so easy to avoid this.
Yeah.
Then I just avoided it.
And I had a separate question, but also specifically about our plans for Psychosis Bank. Will this platform require that individual sites all use a specific transcription software, for example, Elon, to obtain our data, or will it be able to support like multiple transcription methods?
No, we
as
have to
well.
have we have to have a consistent transcription format, not the, it's not a matter
Format,
of the,
yeah.
it's not a matter of the software, it's a matter of the characters. You know, you have to, so there is a, you should take a look at the data. I mean, all the different banks have the same format. You have to have a header, and this is really important for all modern databases. You know, this is I mean, I don't even want to go down to the depths of all this, but it is absolutely required that everybody use the same actual transcription format. Oh,
Just to add to that, Brian, Sunny's question on Psychosis data bank. So one aspect of our protocol, the last page of our protocol, does include some rating information, clinical rating information, and also some information regarding patients, you know, prior experiences, for example, education, how long they went for college for, things like that. Now, this could be the HIPAA part, because this is all, you know, PHI. The way that we are trying to set this up is give the choice to individual sites whether they want to deposit any of this data, numerical data, not just identifiable data, but numerical data of these, to the database or not. Now, if you're REB, you're IRB, we say REB in Canada, it's IRB elsewhere. So if they don't give you permission for putting this data on an open database, a de-identified data, then it's okay to hold on to it, but just give us the metadata of what each site holds so that everybody knows what everybody has in order to.
Oh, okay, that makes sense. Yeah, yeah.
It's
Well, then, yeah, then of course, to get at that metadata, each site would have to expose it or not expose it. Are they going to send you an email and tell you? You know, but yeah, no, I think that is to find those borders is really important. Yeah.
So the other issue of transcription, I mean, my understanding for your databases so far, Brian, is that chat format is the final format in which all the transcribed data is there for people to download and use. But you also hold the raw data. So if somebody wants to completely apply a different form of pre-processing for their own, you know, AI-driven question, and there are many these days, is that still possible to do that with your database?
Well, I mean, of course. I mean, the data. Well, first of all, all the media, you know, is media, so there's no issue about that, and whether it's video or audio. And now, when you say you can convert chat format into other formats.
Yeah.
So if it's a well-defined computer format, we can write a converter.
Yeah, sure.
But you know, it's really we have a converter for 12 different formats: SALT, Elan, Prot, and Anvil's difficult. And in those conversions, some of the conversions are straightforward. Sometimes people, there's some micro issues just you have to learn about, you know. But basically, I don't know what format we're talking about. That, you know, if it's an ill-defined format, I don't even know what it would be. How would you do computational analysis, you know? But there are some people who just want a bag of words, and that can be done, you know. Other people want something that goes into AntConc, or, you know, so there are all of these are possible.
Okay, hopefully that answers your question, Sunny.
I see lots of people in the chat, but I don't know I haven't looked at them,
I'll move on to the next one. Iris, I have access to all the names, so I'll read them out and you can chip in. We have Angelica Silva. Angelica Silva is a linguist and a postdoctoral scientist working here in our group. Angelica, over to you.
Hi, Dr. McWhinney. Thank you for the wonderful presentation. Thinking in the future, do you think that in any way TalkBank could be evolved to work with written data? Because in Psychosis, there are a lot of work with using written tasks.
Well, you can, with written data, of course, yeah, you can, of course. It's straightforward, yeah. But
do you think that TalkBank could be evolved to use written tasks?
Yes, yes. So it's just not our focus, you know. I mean, it's extremely easy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
Okay.
we have several people who have done that, but that, and as I even mentioned AntComp, which is, the standard for corpus analysis. Yeah, I mean, and we certainly can do that, and we have done it for, some reasons. But so you're talking about like writing a story about what? Would a person be writing? I'm thinking almost about some research where people write in order to make themselves feel better or something. Is that kind of idea you're having?
Yeah, yeah.
Or I want to write out my dream. You don't want to talk it, but you want to write the dream out. Yeah, absolutely easy. Yeah, we have a thing called text to chat, and it takes, if you just type the whole thing out, it creates a chat file out of it, and you can run all the programs on it. Yeah.
Yeah, because you like me, we know that the difference between in the complexity in the oral and written language.
Oh,
So we have, of course, many differences in this kind of task.
Absolutely. No, I definitely agree with you. And of course, there's a lot of types of written. There's like, written on the spur of the moment versus something that you really crafted a beautiful, story and all of that. Yeah, all that genre work. Yeah. I mean, at that point, you can use our database, but you can use other tools too. It depends on how much data you have. Really, well, one nice thing though is you can still do this collaborative commentary on that kind of data, which I think is not available in something like so the standard corpus analysis tools don't allow you to do that. Yeah. And we really can do that.
Thank you so much, Dr. McWhinney.
Yeah, definitely. The answer is yes.
Okay, we have Guillermo next. Guillermo doesn't need any introduction. He was the speaker last month. Over to you, Guillermo.
Oh, yeah.
Thanks, Lena. Thanks for the presentation, Brian. It was very inspiring. My only comment was that regarding how long you can hold the data, you have to delete it. If I'm not mistaken, and Iris and the European colleagues should correct me, GDPR requires you to have the ability to delete data if the participant who donated the data requests to do so. So, speaking as an IBMer, we have been international, adopted that standard. So any data that we hold has to be compliant with GDPR. So that creates another layer of complications. You should be able to trace back, whoever holds the data has to be able to trace back the origin of the data in order to comply with GDPR.
Yeah, that's why I talked about an honest broker a little earlier. I said that you had to have a link between the anonymized data and the actual person's name. Yeah. And then once you have that, then you can just, and as I said, we've never had a request for that. But that, you have to have it in principle.
You have to have it, yes.
Yeah, of course, yeah. So no, I think that's the way you do it. And I don't see any problem with that. I mean, it's very unrealistic, of course, you realize that.
Yes, but
I mean, once the data is out, I mean, anyone have a copy, they can do whatever they. I mean, it's and people can have break-ins of passwords and everything. I mean, these things are.
Of course, but the regulators are not scientists, so we have to live with that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, and just to add to that, of course, the data bank is not open to all. You cannot search on the Google to find this data. You have to have a password protected access, and that is managed through what you call as honest brokers in some sense.
Yeah. We actually have the Google blocker on the page on the page top, so they can find that we're there, but they can't find any of the data. Sure. But at least that's the theory, unless somebody breaks it,
Okay, so one more question from the audience, and then I'll pass it back to Iris. She has more follow-ups. So the audience question is from Maria Francisca Alonso, who's a member of the steering committee in DISCOURSE. She's both from Chile and Canada.
Wow.
Hi. Yeah. Well, thanks for this amazing talk. I really like it. And my question is related to the difference in culture. It's like we're working in our protocol, we're trying to apply it in a lot of places. And I saw that in the talk bank, you have like Cantonese, Mandarin, and a lot of languages. And we are trying to apply one protocol to different cultures. So in your experience, I wanted to know if you think that we can see some difference, I don't know, in the amount of words, or I don't know, in the, for example, in the stories that people is going to describe, or the pictures, or I don't know, something like that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you have to take this very seriously, of course. Yeah. I mean, this is like when we did the metaphor project, we were doing Russian, Farsi, Spanish, and English. And yeah, Mexican Spanish. You know, this was because the intelligence people cared about those countries. Actually, we added Chinese, and there were huge differences in metaphor. I mean, everyone has metaphors for everything, but the actual concentration of metaphor was so very, partly by the culture and partly by the language itself. I'll tell you, if you want to write to me, I'll tell you about Spanish. I don't want to, again, I don't want to polemicize too much on the web here. But yeah, and the, you know, for example, in Australia, we can't use the peanut butter and jelly sandwich as our method for procedural discourse. You have to use Vegemite, I think it's called, sandwich in Australia. And, you know, it's something very different in Hong Kong. You don't have peanut butter and jelly sandwiches in Hong Kong, you know. So how do you make some little simple thing? So every culture is really going to be very modifying, not just the words, but it is remarkable how well distributed the Cinderella story is. So there's even a Korean Cinderella story and an Arabic Cinderella story, although it's rather different. The Arabic Cinderella story ends up with somebody getting their head cut off, I think. Yeah, it's a little more, but there is, I don't remember the details, but the Korean one is very similar. But yeah, you would need a different story. You know, there are so many modifications that you need for, and even on the linguistic level, you know, to say that the word, what is a word in Hungarian, or in, you know, in Iktitut, or even in Spanish with all the inflection, you know, to count only words misses all the morphology. So now I don't know that you want to do that kind of you know, detailed linguistic analysis, but yeah, you just can't compare without taking, you know, really understanding that the languages are different, the cultures are different, you know, the protocol has to be somewhat varied. But still, I would think that having some fundamentally similar parallels between pieces of the protocol is really going to be a good idea.
Thanks.
Yeah, no, it's a very important question, very important.
Over to you, Iris.
Thank you, Brian. I can see that you have so much experience in working with TalkBank, and that there is so much we can learn from you. So the Discourse is now a 1-year-old consortium, and we're just starting to gather data. There's been a beautiful protocol that Lena and Wolfram Hinze have set up, and people are now starting to collect data, which we want to share. But maybe you can provide us with some recommendations on how to proceed. So, do you think we should just work with your database, as you have already come this far and you have already so much work in place, and that we should continue to set up this Psychosis database as you suggested, or should we just keep on working in our Discourse database, where of course there is also some there's already some data, and there's also some organization. And another question relating to that, so we don't have a major funding yet. What do you think? Is it feasible at all to progress yet as we are, and just by doing a little bit by ourselves every now and then? Or do you think, no, you really need a full-time data manager and you really need to get this right from the very start and wait until you have some solid funding and then start building your database? What would you say to that,
I think it should
Brian?
be incremental for sure, because even if you were going to go for asking for funding, people would want to see some pilot work and, some existence proof. So, I mean, the idea that you just write a proposal based on nothing would be not as well accepted. But no, I think that the discourse group should simply maintain, I mean, all the infrastructure you've built, and it's just a matter of depositing data really in TalkBank. But you do have to, have that standard transcription format. So if you've, done it in Microsoft Word, or you have a PDF or something, I mean, this is nothing that a computer can handle. So it would have to be reformatted, or, in some cases we could do transcription, but, for us to do transcription, we would really need funding too,
Exactly.
So I think that the data that we would love to add any data that is anywhere close to being, number one, IRB, good informed consent and IRB approval, and,
Right.
A format that we can at least, basically move over into chat. I mean, we can do some reformatting, but I mean, I've taken data from Microsoft Word, and you cut and paste out and you do some changes, and it's not too bad. But if people would actually use chat in the first place, the whole problem is solved.
Right. So you're saying just make this Psychosis database in TalkBank because it already has a very good and existing organization, and then provide, valid IRB, of course, but also good transcriptions together with
That's the biggest barrier, I would say. Well, I mean, assuming that you've got the IRB and everything. The only barrier would be, and the audio is the audio, so that's no problem. Well, I should say the audio, if it's not MP3 or WAV, we convert it. I mean, if it's the Microsoft format was it MWMA, we can just convert. Now, there are almost no audio formats that are a problem. If people want to add video format, of course, that would be great. We could archive it. But it sounds like I don't know how many people are doing video or not. But the other thing is we can pull the audio off the video. That's
right.
pretty
I
easy
think
to
most
do.
of us are doing just audio recording, not
Yeah.
video.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
So that's very reassuring. So we should just keep going and not wait for big funding, but just
I mean, I can set up a
take
page.
it one step at a time.
Yeah, I mean, I put up a link, a page. I don't want to do it this week. I have a grant proposal to write. But honestly, it would be a few hours work.
That sounds great. And then we would just need DTAs, so to transfer the data and get it over.
Yeah, I mean, the transcription, I mean, if it's a small amount of data just as a sample and getting going, we could do a few interviews. How long in time are the interviews that you've been collecting? Is this a 1 hour protocol?
The uniform protocol from Discourse is quite long, actually.
Yeah.
But there were also shorter files.
Yeah, so
that we have previously worked with.
Yeah, and it could be that we would do part of the whole thing, but for example, when in Aphasia Bank, we do the WAB, the Western Aphasia Battery, and we record it, but we don't transcribe it. It's too boring. Let
me ask Lena, how would you see a first step of a collaboration going, Lena?
This is a great discussion to have. Thanks, Iris, for bringing this up. So we have two sets of data, right? One is data that most of us have previously collected, and I'm assuming some of them have already been consented. The patients are okay for open sharing. So we have such data in Canada, for example. We have patients who said, I understand the data will be shared with other researchers in the future, and they have signed it. So that kind of data is generally, this is not based on a discourse protocol. So this may be 3 minutes of speech samples or 7 to 10 minutes in some examples. And this is all in
Okay.
audio format or transcribed format. Now, Brian, I've shared some of them with you, the text files.
Oh, yeah, we looked at that. That was a
Yeah.
text file and we went back and forth and I said, yeah, we could do that. It would take a little work, yeah.
Yeah, so these are quite straightforward. And I think, Iris, you have several data sets like that, which are shorter collections, not based on a protocol, but
Right, non-protocol.
useful
Yeah.
information that we have.
That's right. And we could definitely share the transcripts as they are anonymous.
Yeah. I would like to set up something in TalkBank to start with existing data so that, it goes into a place, all transcribed. Of course, 2 or 3 languages will come in, but that's okay. We can start with the certain available data sets. And I'm sure, I don't know if Thilo is in the audience, but Frederic Steen is. They have large database as well from Marburg, around 500 patient samples. So those kind of data, we can start curating them and work with Brian to see if we can put it on. And then the future is, the larger sampling. The largest sampling is like 20 to 30 minutes, the protocol-based sampling. And many sites are getting up to collect it. If the initial deposition works very well, I'm very inclined to think, why do we need to replicate another effort of making a complete replica of what you've done, Brian?
It makes no sense at all. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
But you still have your whole community and everything, which is, that's your business,
Yeah. No, Discourse will manage the user access and, who's getting and all those things. We'll get the registrations. We'll make sure that there is an informed management group, data management group, who will liaise with you to, make things work in the future. But the TalkBank can be the place where all this data goes finally and stored. Now, the biggest question for future data collection is what each IRB or REB comes up with in terms of, are they happy with your server being your boundaries? I think I've mentioned this before. There's this problem many countries now have. This is the issue of the cloud within my boundary problem. They want the server to be within their national boundaries. So
it is so silly, but that's fine. Well, if we are using Unix servers, and then you could put on the same software, and that would be possible. Yeah.
The reason I bring that up is, if we have 20 contributors in the next few years for the Discourse protocol, and each of them have very disparate, different needs in terms of data storage, then we have to really think, is this easier access, or do we have to set something up differently for satisfying these different data collectors' requirements? And I think that's a discussion that we need to have in the future.
Yeah. Well, now there's one other thing that no one has mentioned, which is there are several levels of password protection. And for Aphasia Bank, we have one password that we use for everyone, have no troubles with it. We also have another password for student access to the grand rounds area. But then there's a third level that we have used for some child language, and definitely for the home bank. And that is where the individual contributor maintains the password. So they know the password and they can give it to their friends or their colleagues, but no one else knows it. So that is something you could consider. It makes it much less generally available, but it does, archive the data. And but that is definitely a possibility. I would not prefer it, but if there were reasons for that, it is possible. I keep on getting phone calls, sorry.
Yeah, that sounds like a great way to go. And I do think that starting with transcriptions will make life a bit easier because, well, at least in many European countries, they do consider speech to be privacy sensitive, because you could, of course, recognize the voice of a friend or a patient or a colleague. So for my country, for example, that would be an issue.
That is a good point. When I say recognition, it's by some unknown person. I mean, sure, you can recognize, someone you know, and you could even recognize them by almost anything. But that is one of the reasons also you have to be very careful about presenting data in a data seminar in a town where you might have collected the data. This is the one time we really ran into problems, actually. In fact, it was with data from Psychosis. And you really don't want to do that. Okay. Because then, you know, the uncle's there in the audience, you know.
Exactly. But if you go through the transcripts, like Alban said, and take out things like I'm the baker's son, or I live in a town called so and so. Then I think the transcription can be pretty anonymous. That should be a very good start. And then let's call it the Discourse in Psychosis Bank. I'm happy to
well, you know, all our names are fairly short banks: Dementia Bank, TBI Bank, and this really long bank name. So I would like if you could think of a short name. Now, Psychosis Bank is fine if that's okay. But Lena said, well, maybe that's a little, you know, but I'm good with that. Okay, well, good.
We'll come up with something.
We can always change.
This has been very inspiring, Brian. We've learned so much for you, and congratulations to the great work and the great talk bank that you set up.
I'm going to stay tuned in on all these sessions. Yeah.
That's nice. Thank you very much for your contribution.
Thank you, Brian and Iris. Let's see if there's any more questions on the chat box. There's no other questions. No rise of hands as well. So if I'm allowed to say a few things before we close, I mean, when I'm talking, people can put questions as well. So just few observations from the discussion you had and Brian's talk. You know, as a medical field, Brian, psychiatry depends very much on eliciting the phenomena through language. You know, people talk and we understand the state from what they say. But unlike many medical fields, if you want to, for example, take dermatology, skin doctors, for example, if you want to train a dermatologist, you have to show them lots and lots and lots of pictures, images, or patients with those skin problems before they can actually learn the trick of the trade. But, you know, in psychiatry, we just don't have, and psychology for that matter, we don't have those kind of speech samples stored to show future trainees as well as do research on. This is a travesty after so many years of work in the field. So I think, you know, anything like what you've done for Aphasia Bank, Child's Bank, and Talk Bank, any effort we can do to start this ball rolling will be something for posterity, and I'm very optimistic and hopeful about that. And of course, there are challenges to climb with changing legal scenario in every country and nationalism in terms of research as well. This is a challenge that all of us have to overcome, but it is not insurmountable because, you know, we have a group of people who value open access now. In every field, and in psychosis research, this is something that I see very often now, that people are keen on open research, open access, not just only taking data, but also trying to see if data can be used. You know, you mentioned data death. Can the data be used forever after you collect? Because it's such an effort to collect this data, and I think it's a travesty not to use it for longer than you know what we intended for. Number one. Number two, you know, if you talk to patients, they are allies for data sharing. Iris has done a very nice work at talking actually to 600, 400, 300 patients, I think. I forgot the exact number, but asking them, what do you want to know about data sharing? Do you think you're happy with this idea? And most of them endorse enthusiastically that, you know, data sharing is fine. You can share my speech data. Of course, there are always concerns about commercial use and what
right, yeah.
Gets put onto, but patients are not the hurdle making, they're not the hurdles for us. They're very interested in sharing data set as long as we can.
Well, again, there are these cultural differences, and you know, Native Americans would be very reticent.
Of course.
So, you know, what Iris was saying, but there are places where people are not reticent, and so that's great.
Yeah, and it's a bit like doing clinical work in psychosis, and most psychologists and psychiatrists here will know the trust building exercise takes a long time, and that applies for this kind of research as well. You know, is the patient ready to give you data? It's very much based on who's collecting, who's running the research, and can you collect this data and store it. So I know, I just want to globally, you know, overall comment is this is not impossible, this is not insurmountable, and it's surprising for people like me who are really new to the field in many ways that this hasn't been done before. So now the time has come. now
Yeah,
the time has come, and we should really put in efforts too. So I don't see any other questions here, but I just want to thank everyone again for coming here and listening to Brian's talk. And thank you, Iris, for leading the discussion, as well as for Britta for sending all her questions. And Brian, we are really happy that you're part of this. It's a privilege to have someone like you, your experience to work in psychosis and take interest in psychosis. So thank you very much. And this recording will be available as video as well for anyone in your groups who missed it. Thanks, everyone. And please join me in thanking Brian and the group.
Thank you. My privilege.
Okay, so I'll stop recording now.